Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Necro Thursday. This is the Necromaniacs horror podcast. And this week, I've got guest Necromaniacs, Paul Aloisio. How's it going, Paul?
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Mike's going to be taking a little bit of a break, dealing with some family tragedies. And thanks for everyone who reached out to him. He appreciates it. And Paul's jumping in. Jeff is still on sabbatical, so he's also a little bit out of pocket right now. So, thank you, Paul, for jumping in.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Yeah. So, before we get going, I just want to shout out the rest of the horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. As you guys all know, if you're listening to this, we're part of a group of content creators at war with mediocrity. And let me tell you, there's quite a bit of mediocrity out there, especially these days. So, kicking things off on Mondays, we've got Brandon Legion's Harwolf 666. Up next in the rotation on Tuesday, the greatest extreme music podcast in the land, Into the Necrosphere, brought to you by Jackie Smith. Wednesday is Everything Went Black, which is my long-standing podcast I've been doing for quite a while. Wednesday is also the day that Iblis Manifestation drops, brought to you by Cheyenne of the great band Trivax. Thursday, of course, is Necro Thursday, but it's also day one of Soul Knox deployments. If you're into all things dark, esoteric, and macabre, definitely check this out. It's brought to you twice a week by Carl Hikara. Friday, Spitball Media comes out, which is features Mike Scandato's brother John Draper, and that's sort of a pop culture lens filled with irreverence and humor. So definitely check that out. Saturdays is a day off. So spring is in the air. Go out, enjoy yourself. Because on Sunday, the sinister minister, Carl Hikara, comes back with day two of Soul Knox. Carl and I are doing our Darkness Weaves collaboration where we explore the dark prose of Carl Edward Wagner, a relatively obscure sword and sorcery, weird fiction, and horror writer. And right now we're doing the Kane stories, and we're in the Dark Crusade novel. So tune in for that. And some of you guys have been reading along, which I think is really cool. The stuff is all available on Kindle with really, really bad covers. The originals had Frank Frazetta covers. So to see something with this horrible, romance novel style, illustrations is really, really bad. But all the hard copies are out of print right now, but you can find them out there. And they've got these beautiful Frank Frazetta covers. So try to find them if you can. How's it going, Paul?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing well. I'm doing well. The year's chugging along and, working on a lot of projects have actually come to fruition, which I'm excited about. So that's good.
That's always the best. The
Yeah.
payoff, the payoff is almost here.
Yeah, man. Has there been anything interesting that you've watched or read or checked out?
I just finally watched The Substance.
Okay.
I thought it was
Thoughts?
pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I thought it was like as mind blowing as everyone else seems to. But it was a good movie. I liked it. And then I just finished reading for the first time The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum.
Yeah.
Which is, everyone has always been telling me how like crazy that book is. So I was kind of putting it off. But I read it, and it's weird to say, but I did enjoy it. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
one of
it's
those
hard to
things.
enjoy that book for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I did though. I think that the writing style is amazing. I am a big fan of Jack Ketchum. The subject matter was really hard to stomach, but obviously that's the point. And it was really well done. It seemed more of like a coherent story as opposed to just shocking disturbingness. It was like a good mix of both. And the fact that it was like based on a true story made it like that much harder to stomach. Like I felt like I needed a shower after I read it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
definitely. I read that. Mike's a huge Jack Ketchum fan. I'm not so much. I mean, I think he's a great writer. I just don't like reading his books really. And yeah, I mean, I give much respect to The Girl Next Door as a novel, but I'm not into that kind of stuff, man. I got to be honest. It's like I've tried to read the quote unquote extreme horror novels out there, and it just the stuff leaves me cold. Like I don't enjoy it. I'd rather stick with like supernatural or like weird fiction or something like that, or vampire stories, werewolf stories. Um, but yeah, I mean, he's definitely the shining star within that genre for sure.
Yeah, and because I don't like a lot of it. Um, like there's a lot of what I consider to be just nonsense, where it's just like, gross out for the sake of gross out. I just really like his prose and the way that he goes about things. And I'm the same as you, whereas like, the subject matter was a little too just like, well, just disturbing for the
Yeah.
sake of, it's telling a disturbing story. So that's why I put it off for so long. But I've been checking off a list of books that, everyone is like, oh, the most, scary or whatever. And this is scary for a completely different reason. But I do like his other stuff. I like, I'm blanking on the name. Um, I'm, I'm actually reading Offspring right now by him, which is the sequel to, um, what is the fucking book called? And I really like this one as well. Um, Off Season. It's
Oh
about
yeah,
like
yeah.
cannibals and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, which is, another thing that I generally wouldn't be into, but for some reason I just like the way that he tells his stories. Um, so I'm enjoying it so far, and just doing like a lot of reading lately. Like I haven't been doing watching many movies because with tour and stuff like that, it's a little more difficult to like sit down and watch a movie in a van. Funnily enough, I
Oh
find it
yeah.
a lot easier to read. Um, and so with that said, like I have been delving a little bit more into like the more extreme side of horror, just because like out of curiosity. I also read Exquisite Corpse by
Mm.
Poppy Z. Bright.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. But once again, that's usually not something that I would go for. It's just like, gore and just like splatter. Once again, though, I did like the writing style. I feel like if you have a good writing story and you could tell, sorry, if you have a good story and a good writing style, I'm much more likely to get into it as opposed to, some of these lesser known authors that are lesser known for a reason, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And the only thing they have to offer is, oh, that was disgusting. Can you believe that happened? It's like you got to sell it to me, and then I'll be able to, you know, get down with it. But yeah, a lot of reading, uh, trying to go down that rabbit hole, um, and going back to just some more classic stuff that I missed for whatever reason. Like I'm a big Stephen King fan.
Yeah,
It's
man,
like
of course.
so I actually never read Misery, and I started that up. I started that, during the winter when it was all snowy out, and I was like, oh, this would be a good, vibe. But for whatever reason, I didn't finish it, so I picked that back up. But yeah, in terms of movies, I feel like the only media I've really consumed lately was The Substance. Um, More so out of curiosity. And I really did like the I don't I guess you could call it creature effects in that movie. I thought that was really well done. And I liked the thought behind the whole movie. I liked what I thought it was trying to say. Um, there's something to be said about horror movies that really try and make a comment on society, which I don't feel always needs to be done, but sometimes it's done pretty well. And I thought The Substance was done pretty well in that regard.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally. I mean, it was one of my favorites of the year. I saw it when in the theater and like, it was I think that no one was really talking about it when I first saw the film. But I think maybe as time goes on, you hear people talk about it, it builds up things and you have an expectation, I think sometimes.
yeah, for sure. It was one of those things where I really liked it. I liked the stylistic approach to it. a lot how like the time period was somewhat ambiguous. Like
Mhm.
everything felt like it was like during the 80s, but like it
Yeah.
clearly wasn't. um, so I really like that aspect, and everyone did a really great job in the movie. It just felt weird. You know what I mean? Like everyone just had a weird sort of personality. Um, and I was super into that. And I've also been doing, actually, since we last spoke on Everything Went Black about David Lynch, I've been rewatching Twin Peaks yet again.
Yeah.
I finally got my like Blu-ray collection for all of them, so I could stop, just depending on streaming services and stuff. And that over the years, that's become increasingly more and more like a comfort watch to me.
Yeah.
And I also noticed a direct correlation with my Twin Peaks consumption and pie consumption. So I need to stop rewatching it because I'm gonna get really fucking fat.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah, it's interesting because like just now, just today actually, right before I talked to you, Brandon Legion and I are kicking off our Black Lodge podcast, which is it's going to be a collaboration doing the entire Twin Peaks series, and it's going to one episode is going to come out and everything went black, and then we're going to flip flop the months between that and Horror Wolf.
Oh, it's awesome, man.
Yeah, we just recorded the pilot episode today, so keep your eyes out for that.
Yeah, it's seems like a pretty good idea, especially as we talked about um on the last podcast I was on with you. I feel like this is as good a time as ever because it's like the interest in David Lynch has really ramped up with his passing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty good time for you guys to do that.
No, totally, and yeah, that's what kind of inspired us to do it was like, he's David Lynch is one of the greats, and Twin Peaks just as a TV show is like it was way ahead of its time, and it's like a precursor to the type of media that we enjoy these days.
Yeah, I mean, not for nothing though. Also, like I'm gonna be in the Pacific Northwest uh later this month, so I was like, whenever I'm going out that way, I really make sure to like get a couple episodes in at least to get me excited for it. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
love that area of the United States.
Well, is band related stuff, right? There's like another tour coming up.
Yeah, yeah, we're going out with this band, Truck Fighters from Sweden.
Yeah,
So that should be cool. We haven't been out west in like 2 years, so I'm excited for that.
that's awesome, man. Yeah, I heard of that band for sure.
Yeah, it's them and this band from Texas called The Well. Once again, as usual, we're like the odd man out on this package because it's a lot more like stoner rock. And then you have us, who's a little more on like the heavier side of things. But I'm fine with that at this point. It's like, I like tour packages to have a bit of variety. Like we just got done with that Exhorder run, and we were the only like Doom tinged band on it. And a lot of people said it was a good break from just like the thrash for like fucking 4 hours straight.
Yeah, dude, Exhorder is awesome, man. I remember seeing them, a while back. They're a great band.
Yeah, totally, man. They sounded like amazing every single night, like perfect mix. And there were some nights where they wouldn't like sound check; they would just do like a line check, and it just still like the way that they are able to dial in with each other is like literally studio quality. It was impressive, to say the least.
Nah, it's sick. That's awesome. I watched Silence of the Lambs again, which is that's actually kind of a comfort watch for me too, believe it or not. Yeah.
Dude, I could believe it because The Exorcist, like, funnily enough, I think one of the first podcasts we did together, we went through like the most disturbing movies we've ever seen, and that was like the first movie that really ever disturbed me.
Yeah.
But just like the quiet and like the way that it was filmed, like I do find comfort in that movie now. So I totally get that. And Silence of the Lambs is really a movie that definitely holds up, decades later. That was another when I was writing a lot, I would do this column where it was like we'd pick like a bunch of people on the site to go through and watch a movie that they've never seen before that they should have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Alien or the original Friday the 13th or something like that. And I chose one of the columns I did was Silence of the Lambs, and it blew my mind because it was one of those movies where it's like, you think you know everything about the movie. It's like it's been parodied to death. Same with like Psycho. You know what I mean? So when you actually sit down and watch it, it's like, oh, there's a reason uh, that this movie is so incredibly popular, and it's a lot more than just Hannibal Lecter in the face mask.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, it's a great movie, man. And I mean, what inspired us to watch it was we Tina and I went to go see the Q Lazarus documentary a couple weeks ago down in they premiered down in Asbury Park, and that was the Goodbye Horses artist,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and we're like, man, we should watch Silence of the Lambs again. So that was something that we're like, yeah, let's watch it again tonight, and then it just, yeah, it's you should check that out. I mean, I don't know theatrically if it's making any kind of run, but if it shows up streaming, you should definitely check out that Q Lazarus documentary.
Yeah, the only thing I really know about Q Lazarus is, the song from that movie.
That's it.
Um,
That's all there is. But now there's like, but that's the thing. She had a whole album's worth of material, and that just got released on Sacred Bones. Like I ordered a copy. The records should be showing up soon.
oh, cool. They
Yeah,
do some
it's
cool stuff, Sacred Bones.
oh yeah, dude. They got like John Carpenter. They got like the David Lynch material. A lot of that's
Yeah.
on I think a Julie Cruz record at the very least. I think is on there.
Which, side note, I absolutely love those John Carpenter records.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean, he's
They're,
playing in the city this fall. I haven't gotten tickets yet. There's a second show that got added.
oh, I did not know that. I thought he only does stuff like out in like the West Coast.
No, no, he like tours and stuff, man. Like I can't sleep on that because I don't want the second show to sell out. I gotta see John Carpenter live, definitely.
Yeah. He just got his star on Hollywood, didn't he?
Oh,
Something like that.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Well deserved, man.
About time.
Yeah. Music related is I just also my copy of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre isolated score showed up today, or not today, but a couple days ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's like for decades I've been hoping that someone would release that, and finally Waxworks put it out.
The score to that movie, I think about this pretty often, like how that movie would have come together as successfully without that specific, just like grindy, just like almost like tough to listen to score.
Yeah, it's like a
Uh,
noise album. It sounds like a noise record.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So excited about that. I've been reading, almost done with it actually, is Adam Neville's Apartment 16, which as anyone on this show knows, I'm a huge Adam Neville fan. And it's like his second novel to be published. So this is like earlier in his career.
Mm,
And it's awesome. Like his novels are awesome because they're all like between 400 and 500 pages usually. And it's
mm,
very like dense, like there's a lot of details and things like that, descriptions. And Neville's just such, actually, I'm going to revise that statement a little bit. His earlier novels were more like 400 or 500 pages, and his more recent ones are maybe between 200 and 300 pages. So,
mm.
maybe an editor was like, you know what, Adam, you got to cut it down a little bit. So, but I like when there's a lot of detail and atmosphere and stuff like that.
Well, The Ritual was great, and I think that was around like 400 to 500, maybe 600 pages, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. That was like one of the last big, I think the reddening might have been the beginning of his like lower page counts. But
Mm.
yeah. But yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm almost done with reading his entire bibliography, man. Like I got all of his short story collections. I got like pretty much everything he's put out.
Oh wow.
I think I have like one more novel to read of his, and I'll be caught up with everything.
He's pretty awesome, man. He's one of those things where one of those writers that I really didn't know much about him, and then I saw The Ritual on like Netflix,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, this is based on a book. Let me check it out." And of course, I thought the book was 20 times better.
Oh yeah.
Like it's almost like barely correlated with each other. They take like a couple ideas. At least I thought, because the book is so much more fleshed out. Um,
Yeah.
which makes sense. I mean, you can only do so much in like an hour and a half movie as opposed to like a 600-page book. So,
I feel like if they were to faithfully adapt the ritual, it would be like a 4-part miniseries or something like that.
well, yeah, because there's so much that goes on, and they kind of just focus on like the big monster in the
Yeah.
movie, whereas like that was to me that was like the least intriguing part. I really like the people in the house, and that like society, that
Oh yeah.
small type of society that
The
was
whole
going
black
on.
metal like aspect to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, man. Adam, I've like emailed back and forth with him a little bit. I've been trying for years to get him to come on Everything Went Black, man, but it's hard.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting to just like hear his process.
Also, he's a metal fan. Like he loves metal, which is cool.
I mean, I should have figured with the black metal characters and
Yeah. Nah, he's like a
spiritual.
big metal fan. So I like to talk to him about just music too.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's we're gonna hold off on the phone calls this week until either most likely Mike comes back. Because there's questions for him and it's like, I'm gonna hold off. But if you guys want to call and leave us comments or questions or movie recommendations, you could do so at 908-913-0782. That's the Necro phone. So give us a shout if you get a chance. All right, so that brings us to this week's feature film, The Last Man on Earth. Based on the novel I Am Legend by Richard Matheson from 1954, which, there's, as we all know, there's been many attempts at trying to, adapt that book. So this is the first one, and in my opinion, probably the best one. Directed by Sidney Sacklau and Ubaldo B. Ragiona,
Ravioli.
Ravioli. Uh, Now, this is interesting, and you're probably going to jump in with something here. Screenplay by Logan Swanson and William Lester. And the Italian version of this was written by Furio M. Monetti and Ubaldo B. Ragione. All right, so you might have a little commentary on the screenplay, I think, right?
Yeah, so and I did not know this until recently, despite having seen the movie many years ago. But Logan Swanson is Richard Matheson. Um, and he did not like the finished product, and he didn't really want his name attached to the project. So he was credited as Logan Swanson instead of Richard Matheson, which to me is very surprising because I think the movie is great.
Yeah.
Um, but I suppose it's one of those things where it's like, your baby and it gets changed a little too much and maybe you're not completely happy with it. And I mean, there are some weird things about the movie. And looking back, it's easier to forgive, such as a lot of I think the whole movie is pretty much dubbed um, in post.
Oh,
Um,
right. So it's all ATR, ADRs.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And for us, that's fine, because we're watching a 1964 movie. But I don't know. Maybe he wasn't happy with that in 1964. I believe I also read that he thinks Vincent Price was a great actor, but he wasn't good for the role. And get this, he later said that he wanted Harrison Ford to star.
Wait, Harrison Ford from 19 from back then?
Yeah, I don't
I
know
didn't
how
even
that
know he
makes.
was acting back then. He must have been a very young man in 1964.
I have no idea. A pretty crazy comment.
Huh.
But I did read that, and he wanted George Miller to direct,
Hmm.
um, which I don't know how that would have worked because I don't. I mean, how old could Harrison Ford have been back then? And
Wow.
like,
Yeah. That's
um,
interesting, man. That's something to think about for sure. Matheson, aside from being a great just novelist, short story writer, is a prolific screenwriter. He did a lot of stuff with Twilight Zone. He did the one of my favorite Karen Black vehicles, the Trilogy of Terror. I don't know if you ever read that or saw that rather.
yes.
Yeah, the stories in that that's there's three pieces, vignettes in there, and they're based on short stories that Matheson wrote. Actually, the copy of I Am Legend that I have has those stories in it as well. So it's pretty cool. And then a lot of his stuff was made into film. The Shrinking Man, Stir of Echoes, Hell House, What Dreams May Come. He wrote that, and yeah, just like a all around like very like a workman like writer. And he wrote in a lot of different genres too. But I know him from like his horror and like weird stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, Jersey guy. He was born in Allendale, New Jersey. February 20th, 1928, and passed in Calabasas, California, June 23rd, 2013. I love Richard Matheson so much, so I just want to give like a little shout out to him, like a little bit of attention on him because he is, even though he didn't love the end product, he's the creator of this whole mythos, this whole story.
Yeah. Um, as we were talking, I actually just brought up the interview where he wrote about Harrison Ford. It's pretty wild about his little comment where he says Vincent Price is a wonderful actor who did marvelous performances for the films I wrote for American International. He was miscast in The Last Man on Earth, however.
Huh.
At the time, I thought maybe Jack Palance would be good.
Ooh.
Now I would pick Harrison Ford, but that will never happen.
I wonder what Harrison Ford was even in. All right, so just to give some, perspective, this movie was released May 6th, 1964. All right. So I don't, maybe we should have looked up Harrison Ford's filmography, but real quick, let's take a second to do that. I don't even, like, what would he have seen him in?
I have no clue. I think maybe it's like one of those things where, like, looking back, if you could have went and changed it, because I'm looking right now, and actually, I think Harrison Ford's first movie was 1966. So,
So, all
like,
right. Yeah, maybe you saw him in a play or something like that. Who knows?
yeah, it's just a bizarre comment, and like it's
Yeah.
something where, like, you read it on Wikipedia, and then you're like, "There's no way that's true." So then you got to like track down where it was
Right.
actually said, and you're like, "Holy shit, that was
Yeah.
actually said." So that's wild to me because I mean I love Vincent Price.
Yo, yeah, dude, one of my favorites, actually.
I almost want to say he's a once in a lifetime generational actor, if that makes sense. Um, like my grandma, huge fan of Vincent Price, and um, funnily enough, my great grandma, who I was lucky enough to have in my life until I think like 3 years ago, was also
Oh, wow.
a fan of Vincent Price. So it's once in a lifetime for many lifetimes.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. I mean, he's like, the stuff, the Edgar Allan Poe type of films that he did, like Blood on Satan's Claw, like this film, they stand out to me as just like great examples of great character actor.
Comedy of Terrors, also, I
Yeah,
think that is a movie that still to this day cracks me up.
yeah. I just want to bring out another thing too here. As we get into the narrative of this movie, um, it's interesting because Night of the Living Dead came out in 1968. Okay, 4 years after The Last Man. And myself, I see a lot of similarities between these two movies.
I was thinking that as I was watching this movie,
Yeah,
like 100%. I actually wanted to bring up that exact same thought process.
yeah, yeah. The vampires, true to form with the Matheson source material, are kind of like they're hybrid vampire zombies in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? If you read the book and then you watch this movie, they're not your typical vampire. and they're not right up straight up zombies. Um, they're kind of a mixture of those two tropes and to film, fiction tropes. So I gotta say, man, it's like if you want to watch, you should watch these two back to backs: the Night of the Living Dead, 1968, and this 1964 Last Man on Earth, and just kind of bask in it, and see that, yeah, probably Romero was definitely influenced by this.
Yeah, I mean the atmosphere alone, it I felt is very similar.
Yeah.
There's like almost like a quiet desperation in both of those films.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
you know, which is crazy to me also because I thought that the movie was directed in such a way that it really, the tragedy of it all was, I feel, completely like expressed very well while watching it. I mean, like you can't help but feel for Robert. I'm blanking on what they changed
Morgan.
his Morgan. Morgan.
Yeah.
It's Neville in the book, I think. So I
Yeah.
get confused. Robert Morgan. Um, there's like a real sadness in his character, and to me, it never comes off as kitschy. Like it comes off as very believable. Um, which for once again for a movie this old, that a horror movie this old is not always that common.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Just the atmosphere, the heaviness, and like you still feel it to this day. You watch the movie and there's like just this bleak characteristic to it. And it must have seemed even darker back in 1964.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when his daughter is crying and she's saying she can't see and she's about to turn into this like vampire hybrid, like it was sad to watch, and
Yeah.
the man just loses everything, and he is truly alone. Um, the beginning of the film where I think there's that sign that says the end is here or the end has come, something like that, and the streets are just like empty, um, which is kind of actually a little more relatable to me now than when I first saw the movie many, many years ago because of COVID.
Sure.
Um, I mean, I remember at the beginning, like the height of COVID, I went to Manhattan, where you could, we wanted some, me and my wife wanted to get some restaurant, and everything was like you could still pick it up. Obviously, you just couldn't sit down.
Yeah.
But I was able to walk in Times Square, completely devoid of any foot traffic or anything. It was like a ghost world. And so, which is hard to imagine, like ever. So when I first saw that movie, I was like, oh yeah, that's weird. Like everything is empty. And then actually experiencing like how empty the world can be made it a little more impactful this time around.
Yeah, I agree completely. And like at the beginning of COVID, I was still living in Brooklyn with my ex, and we watched Omega Man, which is another version of this film that came out in 71 with Charlton Heston. And I think they maintained his name, Robert Neville, in that one. Um, but yeah, we were like, oh, let's watch Omega Man just to kind of, lighten the mood. And it
Yeah.
was like, and I'm like, oh, fuck, man. I was even more depressed after watching that because it was like some of the terminology they were using were like it was pandemic terminology. And I was like, oh, wow, this sounds familiar. And I guess
Yeah.
that's the thing, man. It's like the film really captures this, not only like it's really masterful the way this sort of apocalypse and vampires are combined in this movie, and just the loneliness and like a little bit of a commentary on mankind, and just the there's a lot of things that get touched on in this film. And now I'm speaking specifically about the movie because there's definitely some departures from the novel. And if you guys want to read the novel, I encourage you guys all to go out there just to enjoy Matheson's writing, but to also give a perspective on this film. But watching Last Man on Earth, there is this heavy, bleak tone to the whole movie, and it's black and white. And you know, back then that was more of a practical choice, but looking back, we used to seeing color, but watching black and white films just gives like a very bleak tone to everything.
Yeah. especially in the scene where, another thing is I really like how they did the flashback sequences,
Mhm.
um, and the contrast of the burning the bodies in the pits on screen with no color just looked even more bleak, which is again another really just tragic part of the movie where you know Robert is you know trying to find his daughter that he knows is being thrown into those burning pits. It's like a pretty stark scene, and yet again a surprisingly somber and dark thing to see from a movie so long ago.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, like I was saying, to this day it still works. Really impactful, and watching it in 1964 must have been like even more like disturbing, really, in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Yeah. So let's just run through the cast real quick. Of course, we got Vincent Price as Dr. Robert Morgan, but he's mostly the lens through which the whole narrative is viewed. I mean, most of the film is like a voiceover, really. It's just like him narrating it, you know. Um, let's see, we got Emma Daniele as Virginia Morgan. We've got Giacomo Rossi Stewart as Ben Cortman. There's a lot of Italians in this film.
Hmm.
Franca Betoya as Ruth Collins. Um, I'm trying to pick out some other names here. I mean, that's pretty much it. It's like there's a very small cast except for some, extra people around here. So,
Yeah, which definitely adds to the bleakness and the loneliness of it. Speaking of all the Italian actors, from what I understand, it was shot in Italy
yeah.
to save on costs, which oftentimes that leads to a lot of ADR being used. Um, and I feel like rewatching it, the scenes where Vincent Price's character is talking to a lot of the other characters, it doesn't always look that convincing. Uh, where like, and I feel that way about a lot of movies that have been dubbed, especially from that time period. Um, so yeah, that was interesting because that was something I never knew until doing research for this episode. Like, I'm not sure if I didn't look into it, if I would really notice it. Um, but now that I have, it's like I can't unsee it, and not that it affected the way that I enjoyed the movie,
Yeah.
but definitely it made sense why some of the dialogue seemed a little bit off.
Yeah, I could see that, and it probably just, yeah, it's probably one other thing too that just made Matheson kind of, not satisfied with the production.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we find Morgan, it's full swing. It's after the apocalypse essentially. And we see him living alone. And basically his days revolve around him going out during the day to kill vampires and
Yeah.
and maintaining his weapons and eating and surviving. And there's like really no joy or anything compelling in his life at all.
Yeah, it's just the movie sets up like this miserable, sad character.
Yeah.
I think that the movie, what do you say? I think he said that it takes place in '68 or something, and
Yeah.
says the beginning starts with it's only been 3 years. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, could you imagine 3 years of just not only solitude but just terror and murder every
Yeah.
single day of your life?
Yep. I don't know if I'd last, honestly.
No, I'd be
Yeah.
like, dude, I'm done.
Yeah. And so these vampires are trying to kill him, but they're very zombie-like in that way. Like they're not, you know, intelligent necessarily. Uh, we have some of the same tropes of vampires, like they can't come out during the day and they don't like mirrors and they're repelled by garlic. Okay. In the book, they go into that a little bit more. They put, and that's what I dig about the book. The book, it's I like when they try to use a little bit of pseudoscience, to describe some of this stuff, to explain these things. And Matheson in his book, I Am Legend, he tries to like rationalize some of this stuff, and even the cross is like described. There's some reason. There's reasons why these things work on the vampires.
Yeah. Even the movie, like they don't really go into that, but they do go into why um, Robert is immune to the
Yeah,
whole, which is also kind of like a funny, I think, a funny explanation. But he was bitten by a vampire bat in I think Tasmania or something.
yeah,
So it's like, you know, it's a little silly, but I'm glad that they explained it in some way.
yeah. That's all. Yeah. So the flashback part is a pretty big chunk of the film, really, because it kind of goes into like the backstory with everything. And it's ironic that it is a bat too, especially since you said, like the COVID aspect of things and
Mhm.
my revisit of Omega Man in the early days of COVID. It's like the bat and everything was kind of interesting to me. But yeah, well, that's what we find out about his wife and this child. Um, and he buries his wife without telling the authorities, so she comes back. And that's kind of like a heartbreaking scene in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and not only that, on my rewatch, when she comes back, for some reason I found that the whispering to be let back into the house was like really creepy,
Yeah.
and I thought was done really, really well.
Dude, this movie really is, it's a forgotten classic in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Because I think like this movie, similar to like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, has been like remade a lot,
Yeah,
and Omega Man was cool, but it wasn't like nearly as good as this version, the Last Man on Earth. And the I Am Legend one, you might as well just not even call it I Am Legend, honestly.
yeah, that movie is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
The
You know,
CGI zombie vampire things.
yeah, it's like it's too much of an action film, and there's not enough like brooding darkness like in this film. No atmosphere.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's what we learned about the bat. He's immune to all this, and somehow he's working. Oh, he's a scientist too, which I don't think we mentioned. So
yeah,
he's also working on some kind of like serum or some kind of antidote for this whole thing.
yeah, and so I also like that part of the movie as well. When you know, in the beginning, he was sort of almost like in denial about the whole thing.
Yeah,
When it goes, him just saying like, oh, I'll believe it when I see it, kind of. And then he sees it firsthand, and then it's like, oh shit, because he is working with his friend, I think Cortman, his name, Ben Cortman.
yeah. That's
um
played by Giacomo Rossi Stewart. Yeah.
yeah, which he obviously succumbs to the vampire virus and whatnot. And it's interesting, you know, talking about vampire tropes and stuff like that, because another difference is, like you said, they're not very smart. So it's not like they come back and they're Bela Lugosi. They're like definitely like a like you said, like a zombie hybrid. I mean, like when you see Ben Cortman come back and trying to kill Robert, he's like, "Come out! Like, we
Yeah.
want to kill you. We know you're in there." And before that, he was working together with him.
Yeah. They have like some kind of rudimentary intelligence, but they're not like on any kind of like higher level. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And Corbin and him have this interesting conversation too, where Morgan is his feet are firmly in the empirical world of science. And Cortman is thinking more like he's more like thinking on the esoteric level of this whole thing about how these things are like vampires. You know what I mean? How this is like some kind of like, arcane sort of disease or condition, you know,
yeah,
which I thought was interesting. And I always like that, um, duality sometimes that gets introduced in some of the better versions of these stories about like, actual biology and like magic or the supernatural or something like that.
Yeah, it definitely adds a layer of tension and also frustration because when you go back and forth in the story, and it's like you think like, man, like if they could have just put their heads together or something like that,
Yeah.
knowing what you know now. Whereas it's the denial of it, and you know, I feel that in movies when you see like a bunch of scientists or characters together and they're like all in agreement, like, yeah, this is what's going on, you lose a little bit of the tension. Because I mean, I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I've never worked in like any sort of like pandemic type lab or anything like that.
Yeah, totally.
But I'm sure not everybody is in agreement, right away. And they're just like, all right, let's get to work. There's always going to be resistance and differing opinions and stuff. And I thought that it made the movie more realistic.
So back in the current times, we get a bunch of exposition in this flashback, and then we go back to the current 1968, and Morgan finds a dog wandering around, and it appears to be an actual living dog, so which is wounded, and of course he chases it down. He would love some companionship, and of course dogs are man's best friend, so he brings him into his home and tries to treat him.
Yeah. And then I don't, I wasn't really clear on why he decided to test the dog. Um, because you just see him sort of like petting him.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden he just gets this weird look on his face. I wasn't really clear on what made him start questioning it. But he puts the dog's hair, I think, under a microscope, and him, being like a scientist, like he knows what the virus looks like. And I thought it was interesting how when he comes to the realization that even the dog is infected, he just starts laughing because it's like this cruel twist of fate where it's like I am truly alone.
yeah,
I can't even have an animal as my companion. Which once again I thought was a really good choice instead of him just like in anguish, like, no, how could this be? He just starts laughing because it gets to the point where it's like this is some sort of just cosmic joke of just complete absurdity and terror. So then
yeah.
he disposes of the dog and he's alone again.
Now, one of the things that's never really established, and I can't remember if Matheson does this in his novel, but I don't think it is established, is like the bite of one of these vampires. Does that turn you?
You know, I can't remember either because the last time I read the novel was so long ago.
Yeah,
Um, I'm not sure because I know that especially in the movie, the virus is they talk about it like being carried by the wind.
yeah,
Um, so they don't really go into what really like the vampires are capable of like turning or something.
yeah,
But later on in the movie, they do find eventually Morgan does find more humans that are trying to stave off. This is like it just ties into the dog scene because I
yeah.
think while he's burying the dog, I believe he finds another living human being.
Right. Um, just real quick aside too, just basic etymology. The there, it's unlikely that there's only one person that's immune to this virus too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Hmm.
usually that's kind of like how evolution happens, really. Like, there's like a genetic um, defect or something that causes other parts of the population to survive where other people die. You know what I mean? Or other animals or organisms die. So that's kind of like part of the whole science behind it. But whatever. That's like it's unlikely that he truly is the last man on Earth. But anyway, back to the story. So in the distance, he finds this woman, who appears to be normal. Ruth, her name is.
Yeah, Ruth. And
Yeah,
so like she comes back to his house and he starts being suspicious. He holds garlic up to her and he's like, why is this affecting you? And I think she said, like, I have a weak stomach. I've just been watching people get killed all the time. It smells
Yeah,
too much,
right.
which is a great excuse.
Yeah.
Great
And
excuse for
she's
vampire.
obviously not like the others though, because she actually can have higher, she's like actual, she's normal for all intents and purposes, besides from, the garlic, and we'll find out later that she actually is infected. But this group that she's been living with, they've developed like a vaccine of sorts, which sort of keeps the disease from fully taking them over.
Yeah, and so the whole plan, like when she reveals that, she she says that she followed him because the whole half vampire people are coming and planning to kill him because he has become like a legend. Like he is stalking the streets in the daytime and finding their people and just like murdering them and like taking them off one by one.
Yeah.
And so she holds him at gunpoint. And there's another pretty like I think poignant line where you know Morgan says something along the lines of like, you accuse me of all this violence, and this is how you choose to solve your problem. And Ruth says something along the lines of, well, this is how progress, like through violence and terror, kind of. And I was like, damn, like once again, I felt this movie is very, um, I want to say maybe like ahead of its times. And little things like that are to me like in the dialogue really make this movie so good.
Yeah, exactly. And it's yeah, I totally agree with that. And there's that commentary about just the kind of violent nature of man, and how their justification for eliminating him, who he's become like a vampire serial killer in some ways. He's like this angel of death that's just taking out their population. And but their response to that is like, rather than try to be diplomatic, is to like, execute him, you know?
Yeah, and funnily enough, they find that um, Morgan is able to. I think he's able to completely cure Ruth through a blood transfusion
Yeah.
from him,
Yeah.
and so it's like the tables are now flipped, where it's like these more sentient vampires view him as the freak and the monster, and they want to kill him. Meanwhile, he really is their key to reversing this whole thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ironic aspects to this story at the end, and it's almost like they choose to be in this like, kind of like Twilight world of being half human and half vampire.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show, when people don't talk to each other, like they really don't take the time. I suppose it's because they're scared, clearly, but I was thinking, and obviously it would take a lot of the drama out of the movie. But if they were able to sit down, these more sentient vampires, and talk about what he's learned and how he could fix them, they wouldn't need so much violence. But they just disregard that because they see this monster. So it's like they're both almost doing the same thing. They're both just like trying to survive and stamp out the threat.
Yeah.
So their part of society can live on.
So then, this group of the shock troops show up for this like fascist sort of state that they have,
Yeah, fascist vampire state.
fascist vampire state, and they're But what's interesting too is they also kill the true vampires too. Like they shoot down all those like the actual vampires who aren't taking the serum.
Yeah, because earlier in the film, you see Morgan find a bunch of dead vampires with metal stakes, and he goes, well, "What's going on? There
Yeah.
are others, because
Yep.
his stakes are wooden. You see him making them in his house. That's all he does every day. He makes stakes, out of wood and goes out and kills them. So he sees these metal stakes and he's like, maybe like a glimmer of hope. Like there's more people out there. Which, once again makes it even more tragic because he puts the call out on his little radio and he's like, are you out there? Like, where are you? And then he finds the people and they want to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. So all this stuff catches up to him, and there's a showdown, and Morgan he gets impaled by a spear, and Ruth goes to him during his final moments on in this mortal coil, and he denounces them, and they're freaks and all this stuff, and he's the last true man on Earth, and then he passes, and he's done, he's dead. Now, Ruth is like leaving his body, and they notice there's a baby crying. Okay. And she assures the child that everyone is safe now.
Yeah, I thought that was a great final scene.
Yeah. Now,
Also,
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry to cut you off, but I found it very ironic that, he's eventually killed by, like a spear thrown through him.
Hmm.
Whereas, I guess for the half vampires, it's sort of their own symbolic justice. It's like, we're going to get you by doing the same exact thing you've been doing to our people. And now you're gone and everybody is safe, which is like crazy, like these half vampires are assuring their little half vampire children that the threat is gone and the threat was just a normal human that was immune to the whole disease.
Right. And I also think that no one is going to be safe at all.
No,
Because
absolutely not.
yeah. And it's very unlikely that I think that's it. That's the end. If he is truly the last man on Earth, which I said earlier, it's unlikely that he is just because of the way diseases work. But say, for example, for the argument's sake of this story, that he is the last person which they vanquish. Can these vampires procreate? And this is the end of the line for humanity.
Yeah. A good solution, what Morgan should have done is just get his ass back to Tasmania
Yeah,
because he's definitely not the only person bit by a bat there. You know what I
absolutely,
mean?
man. Yeah, I should have figured out a way to get back to Tasmania. Yeah,
But yeah, no, that's a good point. Is are they truly safe because they can't go out in the daytime.
yep,
They're, mirrors. Well, I guess mirrors don't hurt. They have, do they? Yes, they do.
they do because she avoided the mirror in Morgan's house there. Yeah,
It's just not as intense. I agree, but yeah. So it's like, are they truly safe? No, there's no way. And in the terms of the movie, if he was the last man on Earth, humanity, I think, is doomed. Like that's the end. There's no way.
yeah,
Um, as you said, obviously thinking more logically, there's no way he actually is the last man on Earth. So there is still a chance. But I think that the movie deliberately really wanted to end on just like a sour and somber note. So for all intents and purposes, do you like in the movie universe, do you think that was saying that humanity is done? Like
yeah.
we're just okay.
I do.
I do as
And
well.
there's a little bit of foreshadowing too, like when he's talking to Cortland about how they're just talking about they touch on evolution and just stuff like that. I think they have a conversation about extinct races going extinct and stuff. And yeah, so I think that's it. And in the Omega Man version of this, and I know we're not talking about that one, but the 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 vampires are these like cool, like hippie-esque, you know, communal society where they all wear like shades, and black cloaks. And they might have a better chance of survival because they're less fascist. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but this is a superior movie to The Great Omega Man, which is a great movie, but like this is totally superior to it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lost classic, truly. You
Yeah.
know, you hear a lot of people talking about Vincent Price, um, and you don't hear this movie get brought up that much,
I mean, I
which is
think
a
it,
shame.
yeah, it's fantastic. It's a groundbreaking film. It's, precursor to Night of the Living Dead. And it's a whole new way of sort of looking at vampires, in a lot of ways. And yeah. So what's some differences with the novel is like the novel has way more sexual tension in it than the film.
Hmm.
There's like, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Like, his lack of female companionship, like there's some weird sex stuff from when his wife comes back, and
Yeah,
that's definitely more in the forefront in the novel than in the movie. The movie is pretty asexual, really. Even when Ruth shows up,
yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any way they would have been able to let that fly in that time period to get that movie made with all, the the subject matter.
Yeah.
Um, but it would have been interesting. It would have definitely been interesting because, Matheson in his novels really exploring all of these, other things where it's like you don't really always think about that type of stuff. Where it's like, you know, this like solitary human like trying to survive, and like that's a thing that would probably really happen.
Oh,
Or
absolutely, man. That's like, one of the, biggest motivations in human life is like, procreation, and it's like that's an urge, it's a compulsion that most people have.
yeah. So that, I mean, it would have been interesting for the movie to delve into that, but I don't think that it would have ever happened in a movie from that time period. Um, with all of the quote unquote, I guess there's violence in the movie. There's not really that much. You sort of just see like the after effects, right? You never really see anyone just like getting killed the way that you do in Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, yeah, there's no gross outs like that. It's more just like action, but mostly it's just like this brooding, somber, atmospheric film, you know?
I think that something, and you touched on this earlier, but the disembodied voice of Vincent Price through much of the movie, I think really, really adds to the atmosphere. And I've always loved his voice. I think he has a
Oh
great
yeah.
voice. And I'm clearly not alone in that. I mean, he was in The Grinch
Yep.
for that
Oh
exact
yeah.
reason. Um, but it really, it's crazy to me that Richard Matheson wasn't happy with the casting of Vincent Price because after seeing the movie, I could not imagine anyone else doing it as well as he did. I mean, he was like the king for a very long time of horror and just like creepiness.
And for him, I thought he played it pretty subtle too, because he could be a little hammy at times, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's like a complete like Shakespearean theater guy when he needs to be.
Yeah. Jack Palance wouldn't have been right either, because that dude definitely like chews the scenery mostly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Weird comment. Once again, one of those things where it's like, you're a creative person. So it's like if you had to, I don't know, let's take a Tombs album or something like that. And it was gone and you tried to produce it in like a different medium and you had a whole team of people involved. It's like, there's a good chance that it's not going to come out the way that you wanted to when other people get involved and stuff like that. So I do get it. It's hard for me to wrap my head around it because I find the movie is such a success on so many levels. But I suppose that I do understand his frustrations.
Maybe the fact that maybe his original script had a lot of that weird sex stuff in it,
Yeah, maybe.
you know? And like, because that was like a big part of the novel. And I feel like maybe he might have gotten frustrated that that mostly was taken out, possibly, you know?
Yeah. Not just because, I don't think you're even just trying to say Richard Matheson is just horny, but it really, I think that it added another layer to the humanity of the movie, or
Yeah.
sorry, the novel. And when you take that out, I'm sure, to him it was probably very important. And not having that is kind of like, fuck, man, you know?
Yeah. No, that's just another thought on the whole thing. But yeah, dude, what do you the moment of truth now is what do you give this out of five? Like what's your rating in this film?
What do I give this out of five? You know, I'm not the best at rating things because I'm pretty easy on things. Um, it's one of my favorite movies of all time, obviously. I don't
Hmm.
think that. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorite Vincent Price movies. Um, so I'm very, let's just say this. I give movies like 4.5 out of 5 all the time. And that's like pretty much like almost perfect to me. Like it's a movie I
Yeah.
really, really, really love. And then 5 obviously is like perfect. So I would give this movie 4.
You give it a four.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm very when it comes to reviewing movies because if I were to give it 3.5, that seems a little low because it's like a little in my mind, in my rating score, that's pretty great. But I think this movie's excellent. So
Yeah.
that would have to bump it up to 4.
Yeah, I give it a five because this is, and I can't, it's hard for me to be objective about this movie. So it's this and Night of the Living Dead are 5 out of 5 movies for me for,
Mm.
for decades. I've been thinking that. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. I love this movie. Definitely read the book. Anyone out there who hasn't read this, it's obviously it's still in print. You can get it Amazon or Kindle or whatever, and it's highly recommend the book. It's just it adds so much more to the story, and it has all that sexual tension we were talking about, which is like definitely should be part of the story. And this film, The Last Man on Earth, is definitely out of the movies that have tried to recreate it. I think captures the tone of Matheson's original material better than any of the other films.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good thing that they never remade it with Will Smith in like the early 2000s. It's a great thing that that never happened.
That's it, dude. Yeah, I'm gonna forget about that one for sure. Yeah. Omega Man's good too, by the way, but it's a different type of movie. You know what I mean?
I've never checked that out, and I think now I'm going to, just because of this episode.
Omega Man's fun, so to speak.
Mm,
This is The Last Man on Earth is like a brooding piece of film.
mhm.
Omega Man is a little bit more fun, if that's possible. And that's why we tried to watch that at the beginning of the pandemic, but it didn't work really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
But
could
yeah,
see that.
yeah, totally. All right, Paul, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. And you're definitely it's much great stand-in for Mike or Jeff. I appreciate
Yeah,
that, man.
dude, like I said, anytime. Thank you for having me. I love coming on, talking to you, and watching some awesome movies.
Right on, dude. All right, have a good day. Take care.
All right,
All
take
right,
it easy.
bye.